The marriage happens today. I don't care which daughter signs. You're asking me to marry a man I've never even met.
You still have a choice. She only wanted your money.
I never wanted any of this.
She's the only person who never treated me like a broken man.
They sent Nora Vale down the aisle because her beautiful stepsister refused to marry a man in a wheelchair. The groom was Adrian Blackwood, a billionaire CEO whose face had appeared on magazine covers for years. Before the accident, he had been called one of the most powerful young businessmen in America. After the accident, people spoke about him differently. They called him tragic, broken, finished. Everyone whispered that Nora was only there because nobody else wanted him. The ugly replacement. The poor girl. The sacrifice. But on the day of the wedding, something happened that no one could explain. When the priest asked if anyone objected, Adrian's hand tightened around the armrest of his wheelchair. His eyes locked onto Nora. Not with weakness, not with fear, with intention. And for one terrifying second, she realized the paralyzed billionaire was not helpless at all. He was waiting for something, or someone, and the truth behind that moment would change both of their lives forever. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's story. Before we begin, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss more emotional, dramatic, and surprising stories ahead. Be sure to leave a comment telling us where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. 3 weeks earlier, Nora had no idea her life was about to be traded like a business contract. The morning started the same way most mornings did, before sunrise, before anyone else in the house woke up. She was already cleaning. The Vale residence sat on one of Charleston's most expensive streets. White columns, iron gates, perfect landscaping. From the outside, it looked like the home of a happy, wealthy family. Inside, it felt very different. Nora carried a basket of folded laundry down the hallway while trying not to make noise. The less attention she attracted, the easier the day usually went. Unfortunately, that never lasted long. Nora. The sharp voice came from downstairs. Her shoulders tightened immediately. Vanessa Vale, her stepfather's wife. Nora carefully set the basket down and hurried toward the kitchen. Vanessa stood beside the marble island, holding a coffee cup. "This is cold." Nora looked at the cup. Steam was still rising from it. "I'm sorry. I'll make another one." "You should be sorry." Vanessa shoved the cup toward her. "I don't understand how someone can be so useless." Nora lowered her eyes. Arguing never helped. Vanessa seemed satisfied by the silence. She always was. A few minutes later, another voice entered the room. Celeste, Vanessa's daughter, 24 years old. Beautiful. Confident, the center of every room she entered. She wore designer clothes even for breakfast. When she walked past Nora, she barely looked at her. Mom, did the Blackwood people call again? Vanessa sighed dramatically. Unfortunately. Nora continued wiping the counter. She had heard that name before. Blackwood. Everyone in Charleston knew it. The Blackwoods owned businesses worth billions, airports, shipping companies, technology investments. Half the city seemed connected to them somehow. Celeste rolled her eyes. "I already told you. I'm not marrying him." Vanessa lowered her voice. Nora pretended not to listen, but the kitchen was quiet enough that she heard every word. "Things have changed." "So what, he had an accident?" "I know. People still expect the marriage." Celeste laughed. A short, cold laugh. "No. They expect me to marry a man who can't even walk." The room fell silent. Nora looked down at the countertop. Something about the way Celeste said it bothered her. Not because she knew Adrian Blackwood. She didn't. but because she knew what it felt like to be judged for something you couldn't control. Vanessa crossed her arms. You don't understand what's at stake. I understand perfectly. Celeste grabbed her purse. I'm not tying myself to a wheelchair for the rest of my life. Then she walked out. The front door slammed. Vanessa stood motionless. For a moment, genuine panic crossed her face. Then she noticed Nora watching. Immediately, her expression hardened. What are you staring at? Nothing. Then get back to work. Nora nodded. As always. She returned to cleaning. As always. But for some reason, the conversation stayed in her mind all day. That evening, she picked up her foster brother from an after-school program. Liam was 12, small for his age, quiet around strangers, the only person in the world who truly felt like family. The two of them walked through a neighborhood park as the sun disappeared behind the trees. Liam kicked a pebble across the sidewalk. Bad day. Nora smiled. You always know. You get that face. What face? The one where you're pretending everything is fine. She laughed softly. Liam had always been observant. Maybe because life had forced him to grow up too quickly. They sat on a bench. For a few minutes, neither of them spoke. Then Liam asked the question she dreaded. Did the social worker call again? Nora's stomach tightened. Yeah. He looked away. That answer told him enough. The foster arrangement was becoming complicated. Nora was 26. She worked 2 jobs. She rented nothing because she couldn't afford it. And legally she had almost no chance of gaining permanent guardianship without financial stability. Every month became another battle, another form, another review, another warning. If things didn't improve soon, Liam could be placed elsewhere. The thought terrified her. Not because she feared being alone, because Liam had already lost too many people. She couldn't bear the idea of becoming another one. We'll figure it out, she said. Liam nodded, but neither of them sounded convinced. That night, Nora returned to the Vale residence feeling exhausted. The house was strangely quiet. A bad sign. Usually silence meant someone was planning something. When she entered the main living room, she immediately understood why. Vanessa sat on one sofa. Celeste sat on another. Her stepfather, Richard Vale, stood near the fireplace. All 3 were waiting. For her. Nora stopped walking. A knot formed in her stomach. What happened? No one answered right away. Vanessa gestured toward an empty chair. Sit. Nora remained standing. I'd rather stand. Vanessa's smile disappeared. Richard finally spoke. We need to discuss an opportunity. Opportunity? The word almost made Nora laugh. Opportunities never belonged to her. Only responsibilities did. Only sacrifices. What kind of opportunity? Celeste crossed her arms. The look on her face was strange. Part annoyance, part relief, as if she had escaped something and was happy someone else might take her place. Richard cleared his throat. The Blackwood family contacted us today. Nora frowned. The Billionaire family? Yes. Silence settled over the room. Then Vanessa leaned forward. The marriage agreement can still proceed. Nora stared at her. She didn't understand. Not yet. Then Vanessa said the sentence that changed everything. Celeste won't marry Adrian Blackwood. Another pause. And then, but you can. For several seconds, Nora genuinely thought she had misheard. Nobody laughed. Nobody corrected it. They were serious, completely serious. Nora slowly looked from one face to another. You want me to marry him? Vanessa nodded. As a replacement. The word landed harder than she probably intended. Replacement, not daughter, not family. Replacement. A substitute. A backup option. Something to use when the preferred choice was unavailable. Nora felt her chest tighten. Then Celeste spoke, almost casually. As far as they're concerned, they just need a bride. The room became very still. Nora stared at them. And for the first time in years, she wasn't sure whether to feel angry, or insulted, or afraid, because something about this offer felt wrong, deeply wrong. Yet beneath that feeling was another thought, a dangerous thought. If she said yes, could this finally be her way out? And why would one of the richest families in America agree to marry a woman they had never even met that night, unable to sleep? Nora searched everything she could find about Adrian Blackwood. Article after article appeared. Photos, interviews, business profiles. Then came the accident. A black and white newspaper clipping caught her attention. She almost scrolled past it. Almost. But something unusual stopped her. At the bottom of the article, beneath the summary of the crash investigation, a single sentence appeared. Court order issued. Accident file sealed. Nora stared at the words. Her pulse quickened. Why would a traffic accident report be sealed by court order, and what exactly was someone trying to hide? Before continuing, Nora reread the article 3 more times. The words did not change. Court order issued. Accident file sealed. She searched for follow-up reports, public records interviews, anything that could explain why a traffic accident involving Adrian Blackwood had been hidden from public view. But every search led to the same wall. Nothing. For someone as famous as Adrian Blackwood, the silence felt unnatural. Usually, when billionaires crashed their cars, the media never stopped talking about it. There would be investigations, speculation lawsuits, experts on television. Yet, in Adrian's case, everything seemed to disappear after a few weeks. It was as if someone had quietly erased the story. Nora closed her laptop just after midnight. The room around her felt small. Her bedroom had once been a storage room beside the laundry area. The ceiling slanted awkwardly. One wall still carried water stains from years ago. Meanwhile, upstairs, the Vale family occupied nearly the entire second floor. The contrast had never bothered her as much as it did now, maybe because for the first time she had been offered a door out. A dangerous door, but still a door. She barely slept. The next morning, Vanessa summoned her before breakfast. Again. Nora entered the dining room and immediately noticed something different. Nobody was eating. Richard sat at the head of the table with a stack of documents. Vanessa looked tense. Even Celeste seemed unusually quiet. That alone told Nora the situation was serious. Vanessa folded her hands. "We need an answer." Nora remained standing. "You already know this is insane." "No," Vanessa said coldly. "What's insane is throwing away an opportunity most women would beg for." Nora almost laughed. Opportunity. That word again. As if marrying a stranger was a scholarship. As if becoming a replacement bride was a privilege. Richard pushed a folder toward her. "The Blackwoods are willing to discuss financial arrangements." Nora didn't touch it. "I don't care about financial arrangements. Maybe you should." His voice carried an edge now. "Your situation isn't exactly stable." The words hit harder than he probably intended, because they were true. Nora worked constantly, yet every month felt like survival. Every bill mattered. Every unexpected expense became a crisis. And Liam's future hung over everything. Vanessa leaned forward. "If you marry Adrian Blackwood, you'll never have to worry about money again." Nora looked directly at her. "That's your argument. It's reality." "No." Nora shook her head. "That's your reality." For a brief moment, the room became very quiet. Vanessa hated being challenged. Everyone knew it. Celeste watched the exchange carefully but said nothing. Then Richard spoke again. This time more softly, almost strategically. What about Liam? Nora froze. He knew exactly where to strike. Richard continued. The social worker called yesterday. Her stomach dropped. How do you know that you left paperwork on the kitchen counter? Nora felt a wave of frustration. She should have been more careful. The agency is reviewing his placement situation again, Richard continued. Correct? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Everyone already knew. Richard nodded. Then maybe you should think about what's best for him. The conversation ended shortly afterward. But the damage had already been done. For the rest of the day, Nora couldn't stop thinking about Liam. Not the marriage, not the billionaire. Liam. That evening, she attended a meeting with his social worker, a woman named Sandra who had worked with them for nearly 2 years. Sandra genuinely cared. That was the hardest part. She wasn't cruel. She wasn't trying to hurt anyone. She was simply trapped inside a system built around rules. And rules didn't care about feelings. The meeting lasted less than an hour, but every minute felt heavier than the last. When it ended, Sandra looked exhausted. So where does that leave us? Nora asked. Sandra hesitated. Then she chose honesty. If your financial situation doesn't improve, they'll eventually recommend alternative placement options. Nora felt her chest tighten. Alternative placement, such a clean phrase, such a brutal reality. It meant Liam being sent somewhere else. Again. Sandra sighed. I know how much you love him. Nora looked away before her emotions became obvious. He already lost too many people, I know. He deserves stability, I know. The repetition somehow made everything worse, because neither of them could change the facts. Outside the office building, Nora sat alone in her car for nearly 20 minutes. The sun was setting. People walked past carrying groceries. Families crossed the street together. Normal lives, normal problems. Meanwhile, she felt trapped between impossible choices. Eventually, her phone buzzed. Liam. She answered immediately. Hey, are you okay? Nora smiled, despite herself. The kid always knew. I'm fine. You're lying. Maybe a little. A brief silence followed. Then Liam spoke carefully. They said something bad, didn't they? Nora closed her eyes. She hated this. Children shouldn't have to worry about things like this. They said we need to keep fighting. Another pause. Then Liam surprised her. Would marrying him help? The question caught her off guard. What the billionaire? Nora stared through the windshield. Why are you asking that? Because I heard Vanessa talking. Of course he had. The walls in the Vale house were thin. Liam continued. You don't want to do it. No. But you're thinking about it. Nora couldn't answer, because that was true. Liam's voice softened. You always tell me people matter more than money. The words struck deep. She had told him that many times, because she believed it, still believed it. Yet life had a way of testing beliefs, especially when someone you loved might pay the price. That night, Nora returned home emotionally drained. As she walked through the front door, a black luxury SUV sat in the driveway. Not one she recognized. Inside, the atmosphere felt strange. The staff moved carefully, whispering, watching. Nora entered the living room and immediately understood why. 2 men in dark suits stood near the fireplace. One carried a leather portfolio. The other appeared to be security. Vanessa practically glowed with nervous excitement. Richard stood straighter than usual, almost deferential. The moment Nora entered, both men looked at her. The older one stepped forward. Miss Vale, yes. He offered a professional smile. My name is Martin Graves. Nora shook his hand cautiously. I'm legal counsel for the Blackwood family. The room suddenly felt smaller. Vanessa quickly motioned toward a chair. Please sit. Nora ignored her. Martin seemed to notice. If he did, he was polite enough not to comment. I understand you've been informed about the proposed marriage arrangement. Proposed is one word for it. To his credit, Martin almost smiled. Almost. The Blackwood family would like to formally request a meeting. Nora blinked. A meeting with Mr. Blackwood? Her heartbeat quickened. This was the first time anyone had suggested she would actually meet Adrian, not marry him. Meet him. A surprisingly important difference. When Martin opened his portfolio. 3 days from now. Vanessa looked delighted. Richard looked relieved. Nora looked confused. I haven't agreed to anything. No, Martin said calmly. You haven't. His answer surprised her. There was no pressure, no manipulation, no demand. Only a simple statement of fact. Then he added something even stranger. Mr. Blackwood insisted on that. Nora frowned. What do you mean Martin closed the portfolio? He said if there was going to be a marriage, he wanted the woman involved to have a choice. The room fell silent. Vanessa's expression tightened immediately. Clearly, she disliked the word choice. Nora noticed. And so did Martin. For the first time that evening, she felt genuine curiosity. Not about the money, not about the mansion, not about becoming part of some wealthy family, about Adrian himself, a man powerful enough to buy almost anything, yet apparently unwilling to buy a bride. As Martin prepared to leave, Nora asked one final question. Why me? The lawyer paused. For the first time, he seemed uncertain. Then he answered carefully. Because Mr. Blackwood personally approved your name. Nora felt a chill run through her. Has he met me before? No. Then how does he know who I am? Martin held her gaze for a second, a little too long, as if he knew more than he wanted to say. Then he finally replied. That Miss Vale is a question you'll have to ask him yourself. And after the lawyer left, Nora couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere inside the Blackwood family, a secret had already begun moving toward her. One that started long before any marriage proposal. One that somehow involved her. And 3 days later, she would come face to face with the man who had chosen her. For the next 3 days, Nora thought about little else. She still worked, she still cleaned, she still cooked meals she was rarely invited to eat. But beneath every ordinary task, one question kept following her. Why had Adrian Blackwood chosen her, not Celeste? Not someone from Charleston's wealthy social circles. Her. The question became even harder to ignore because nobody in the Vale house seemed interested in answering it. Vanessa acted as if the marriage was already settled. Richard became strangely attentive, speaking to Nora with a politeness she had never received before. Even Celeste's attitude shifted. Not warmer, just different. Almost relieved. As though she had escaped a disaster and was grateful someone else had stepped into her place. The night before the meeting, Nora barely slept. She sat on the edge of her bed while Liam worked on homework at the small desk beside the window. The room was quiet except for the scratching of his pencil. Eventually, he looked up. You're nervous. Nora smiled weakly. Am I that obvious? Only to people who know you? That answer made something ache inside her chest. Liam knew her better than anyone, maybe because neither of them had ever truly belonged anywhere else. He set his pencil down. You don't have to do this. Nora looked away. I know. Then don't. Simple words, simple logic, the kind children often had before life complicated everything. Nora wished things were that easy. If I walk away, nothing changes. Maybe that's okay. No. The answer came faster than she expected, because deep down she knew it wasn't okay. Nothing about their situation was okay. Not the constant financial pressure, not the fear of losing Liam, not spending every day living under Vanessa's control, not surviving instead of living. She reached over and squeezed his shoulder. I'm just meeting him. Liam studied her face. Do you think he's a bad person? Nora thought about the newspaper articles, the interviews, the photographs, the mysterious accident, the sealed report, the billionaire nobody seemed willing to talk about honestly. Finally, she shrugged. I don't know. And that was the truth. The next morning, a black sedan arrived exactly at 9. Not 9:05, not 9:10. 9. The driver stepped out wearing a dark suit. Professional, polite, efficient. Everything about him reflected the world he came from, a world completely different from Nora's. Vanessa nearly followed her to the front door. Remember who you're representing. Nora stopped, slowly turned around. For years, she would have stayed silent. Not today. I'm representing myself. Vanessa's smile vanished immediately. The silence that followed felt surprisingly satisfying. Then Nora walked out before anyone could respond. The drive to Blackwood House took nearly an hour. The further they traveled from downtown Charleston, the larger the properties became. Long private roads, gated entrances, land that stretched for acres. Eventually the car turned toward the coastline. A pair of massive iron gates opened ahead. Beyond them stood one of the largest private estates Nora had ever seen. Not flashy, not gaudy, just powerful. The kind of place that didn't need to prove its wealth because everyone already knew. The ocean shimmered behind the property. White stone walls overlooked the water. Security personnel stood near the entrance. Even the landscaping looked expensive. Nora suddenly became aware of her modest dress. The feeling irritated her. She hated how wealth could make people question their own worth. A person shouldn't feel smaller because someone else's house was bigger. Yet sometimes it happened anyway. The driver escorted her inside. The main entrance opened into a grand foyer filled with natural light. Nothing felt cold or showy. Instead, everything carried the quiet confidence of old money. A woman in her 60s approached first. She wore a navy suit and a warm expression. Nora. The kindness in her voice immediately surprised her. I'm Marin Blackwood. Nora shook her hand. Marin's grip was gentle. Real. Not performative. It's nice to meet you. And you. For a second, Marin's smile softened. Almost sadly. As if she saw something in Nora that reminded her of someone else. Before Nora could ask anything, another voice interrupted. You're late. The warmth disappeared instantly. Nora turned. A tall man stood near the staircase. Silver hair, sharp features, perfect posture. Even without an introduction, she knew exactly who he was. Conrad Blackwood, Adrian's father. His presence filled the room immediately. Not because he was loud, because everyone around him seemed careful, measured, guarded. The way people behaved around someone accustomed to control. Nora checked the clock. She wasn't late. Conrad knew it too. The comment had been intentional, a test, or a warning. Good morning, Nora said calmly. Conrad barely nodded. His eyes swept over her, assessing, calculating, almost like he was reviewing a business proposal rather than meeting a human being. Then he looked away, apparently satisfied, or disappointed. Nora wasn't sure which. Moments later, another woman entered. Young, elegant, beautiful, Exactly the type of woman society expected beside a billionaire. Conrad introduced her as his executive assistant. Yet the way she lingered near him felt unusual, not inappropriate, just familiar. Too familiar. Nora filed the observation away. Something about this family already felt complicated. A few minutes later, Maren escorted Nora toward a private wing of the estate. The atmosphere changed immediately. The noise faded. The hallways became quieter, more personal, less corporate. They eventually stopped outside a pair of large wooden doors. Maren hesitated. For the first time, genuine nervousness crossed her face. He isn't always easy. Nora raised an eyebrow. That's encouraging. A small laugh escaped Maren. Then she knocked. A voice answered from inside. Deep. Controlled. Come in. Maren opened the door. Nora stepped inside. And finally saw Adrian Blackwood. For a moment, everything she expected disappeared. The media had always described him as tragic, broken, a former billionaire CEO destroyed by fate. The man sitting near the window looked nothing like that. Yes, he was in a wheelchair. Yes, the accident had clearly changed his life. But weakness was the last word Nora would have chosen. His shoulders remained broad. His posture remained straight. His eyes remained sharp. Dangerously sharp. Like someone who noticed everything. The room itself reflected that same energy. Books, financial reports, legal documents, a laptop displaying market data. Nothing about the space suggested surrender. Adrian looked up from the report in his hands. Their eyes met. And for several seconds, neither of them spoke. Nora felt strangely exposed, not because he was judging her, because he seemed to actually see her. A rare experience. Most people looked at her and saw a poor girl. A servant, a replacement, a problem. Adrian appeared to be looking for something deeper. Finally, he set the report aside. Miss Vale, Nora is fine? A faint smile appeared. Then call me Adrian. Maren quietly excused herself and left. The door closed. Silence settled over the room. Not awkward silence. Careful silence. The kind that exists when two strangers understand something important is about to happen. Adrian gestured toward a nearby chair. Please sit. Nora did. For a moment he simply studied her. Not rudely, thoughtfully. As if comparing reality to a version of her he already knew. That realization sent a chill through her, because it confirmed her suspicion. He had chosen her for a reason. Then Adrian asked the first question. Not about marriage, not about money, not about contracts. Why are you considering this? The directness caught her off guard. Most wealthy people hid behind polite conversation. He didn't. Nora thought carefully, then decided to give him part of the truth. Not all of it, just enough. I need a way out. His eyes never left hers. A way out of what, my life? The answer hung between them. Adrian didn't laugh, didn't pity her, didn't offer empty reassurance. Instead, he nodded slowly, as though he understood exactly what she meant. Then he surprised her again. That's the most honest answer I've heard in months. For the first time, Nora found herself wondering if Adrian Blackwood might be far lonelier than the newspapers ever realized. And then, just as the conversation seemed ready to continue, Adrian said something that instantly changed the mood in the room. If you decide to marry me, there's something you should know. His voice became quieter, harder. The Blackwood family is not safer than the family you're trying to escape. And suddenly Nora realized this meeting wasn't going to be about a marriage at all. It was going to be about a warning. Nora stared at Adrian for several seconds after he spoke. The Blackwood family is not safer than the family you're trying to escape. The words settled heavily between them. Most men in his position would have spent the meeting selling themselves. They would have talked about wealth, security, opportunity, luxury. Adrian had done the opposite. He had issued a warning. That alone made Nora trust him a little more than she wanted to. "What exactly does that mean?" she asked. Adrian looked toward the ocean beyond the window. For a moment he seemed to be deciding how much truth he could afford to share. Then he turned back toward her. "It means that if you marry me, you won't be entering a fairy tale." "I wasn't expecting one." A faint smile touched his lips. "Good." The smile disappeared almost immediately. "My family has its own agenda. So does mine." "Then maybe we understand each other." The honesty surprised both of them. Nora wasn't used to conversations like this. Most wealthy people she had met either ignored her or talked down to her. Adrian did neither. He listened. That simple act felt strangely unfamiliar. After a few moments, Adrian asked another question. "What happens if you refuse?" Nora hesitated. Part of her wanted to keep her personal life private, but another part was tired of pretending everything was fine. So she told him enough. Not everything. Just enough. "My foster brother could lose his placement." His expression changed slightly. Not dramatically, but she noticed it. "You take care of him, yes?" "Alone," she nodded. Adrian absorbed the answer quietly. No pity, no judgment, just understanding. That made it somehow harder to talk, because kindness often reached places cruelty never could. "My situation isn't exactly impressive," Nora admitted. "It doesn't need to be." She looked at him. "You say that because you've never had to worry about paying rent." The moment the words left her mouth, she regretted them. Not because they weren't true, because they sounded unfair. Yet Adrian surprised her again. "I used to." Now it was Nora's turn to be surprised. "What my father is wealthy." His voice remained calm. "I wasn't always." Nora frowned. She had read dozens of articles about Adrian Blackwood. None of them mentioned that. Adrian seemed to notice. "The media likes simple stories. And yours isn't simple." A shadow crossed his face. "No." Before she could ask more, a knock interrupted them. The door opened. A woman entered carrying a tablet and several folders. The same assistant Nora had seen earlier. Beautiful, confident, perfectly composed. The atmosphere changed immediately. Subtle, but noticeable. Adrian's expression became more guarded. The woman stopped beside him. "The board meeting starts in 30 minutes. Adrian nodded. "Thank you, Victoria." Victoria. The name finally clicked. She handed him several documents. Then her gaze shifted toward Nora. Professional, polite, but distant, as if Nora were a temporary inconvenience, a problem to be managed, not a person. The feeling lasted only a second. Yet Nora noticed it. People who grew up overlooked often became experts at noticing small things. Victoria left. The door closed. Silence returned. But something had changed. The conversation no longer felt private. Adrian glanced at his watch. "I should get back to work." Nora stood. "So that's it for today." That answer somehow disappointed her, which was ridiculous. She barely knew him. Still, part of her had hoped for more answers. Instead, she was leaving with even more questions. As she prepared to leave, Adrian spoke again. "Nora." She stopped. What his eyes held hers. "Steady. Serious. If you decide to walk away, I'll respect it." The words felt genuine. Completely genuine. And that made them dangerous. Because every person in her life seemed to want something from her. Adrian was the first one offering a choice. For some reason that mattered. A lot. The drive home felt longer. Nora spent most of it staring out the window, thinking, replaying every detail. The warning, the questions, the strange honesty, the loneliness she had glimpsed beneath Adrian's controlled exterior. By the time she returned to the Vale residence, she was more confused than before. Vanessa practically attacked her the moment she stepped through the front door. "Well," Nora sighed. "Hello to you too. What happened?" "We talked." Vanessa looked horrified. "Talked?" "Yes." "What did he say?" Nora deliberately walked past her. That only made Vanessa follow. "He asked about me. Why, I don't know." Vanessa didn't like that answer. Not one bit. The truth was obvious. The Vale family had expected a transaction. What happened instead was something far less predictable, a conversation. That uncertainty made them nervous. Over dinner, the pressure intensified. Richard spoke about stability. Vanessa spoke about opportunity. Celeste spoke about reputation. None of them asked what Nora actually wanted. Not once. Eventually, she pushed her chair back. "I'm tired," Vanessa frowned. "You haven't given us an answer." "No." "Then when will you? When I have one." Without waiting for permission, she left. The argument followed her all the way upstairs. That night, she sat beside Liam's bed. He was already half asleep. Still, he opened one eye when she entered. How was the billionaire Nora laughed softly. "That's your question. It's an important question." She thought about it. Longer than expected. Finally, she answered. "He's not what I expected. Good or bad, I don't know yet." Liam considered this. Then he smiled. "That means good." Nora shook her head. "How does that make sense? Because if he was bad, you'd already know." Children had a strange way of simplifying complicated truths. After Liam fell asleep, Nora remained awake. Her mind refused to settle. Around midnight, she opened her laptop again. This time she searched for more than just the accident. She searched for Adrian himself. Old interviews, college articles, business profiles, anything. Hours passed. Eventually, she found something unusual, an interview from years earlier, before the accident, before the fame reached its current level. The interviewer had asked Adrian what he admired most in people. His answer was surprisingly simple. People who keep their dignity when nobody is watching. Nora read the sentence twice, then 3 times. For some reason, it stayed with her. Maybe because nobody had ever spoken about dignity around her. Success, money, status, beauty. Those were the things people valued. Not dignity. Yet Adrian apparently did. The discovery unsettled her more than it should have, because it made him feel real, and real people were much harder to walk away from. The next morning, another surprise arrived, a formal envelope bearing the Blackwood family seal. Vanessa nearly snatched it from the mail carrier herself. Nora opened it carefully. Inside was a simple letter. No pressure, no demand, no contract, just an invitation. A second meeting? Private, at Blackwood House. At the bottom appeared Adrian's signature. Below it, a handwritten note. 1 sentence. "If you agree to come, there is something important I need to tell you." Nora stared at the message. Something important. Not discuss. Not negotiate. Tell you. The wording bothered her, because it implied Adrian already knew something she didn't. Something connected to her. The uneasy feeling followed her for the rest of the day. And that evening, while searching through old articles again, she found a photograph from the year of Adrian's accident. The image itself wasn't remarkable. A hospital parking lot, several doctors, security personnel, reporters. But in the corner of the picture, barely visible near the entrance, stood a woman. A woman Nora knew. A woman she had not seen in 10 years. Her foster mother, Elise Moreno. Nora's heart nearly stopped. She zoomed in. Again. And again. There was no mistake. It was Elise, standing outside the hospital where Adrian Blackwood had been treated after the accident. The same woman everyone claimed had abandoned Nora years ago. And suddenly the billionaire's accident and Nora's own past no longer looked like separate stories. They looked connected, in a way that made absolutely no sense, yet somehow felt impossible to ignore. Nora barely slept that night. The photograph remained open on her laptop long after midnight. Every time she looked at it, she found herself zooming in again. The woman standing near the hospital entrance was older than she remembered. The image was blurry. The lighting was poor. But it was still Elise Moreno, the woman who had raised her, the woman who had taught her how to braid her hair, how to balance a budget, how to treat people with dignity even when they treated you badly, and according to everyone in the Vale household, the woman who had abandoned her without a word. For years, Nora had tried not to think about that disappearance. The hurt had never gone away. She had simply learned how to carry it. Now everything felt uncertain again. Why had Elise been at Adrian Blackwood's hospital? Why had she never mentioned him? And why did Adrian seem to know something important about Nora? The questions followed her all morning. By afternoon, she found herself back inside the black sedan, heading toward Blackwood House. This time the estate felt different, less intimidating, more mysterious, as if she had already stepped into a story she didn't fully understand. Marin greeted her at the entrance once again. The older woman looked relieved to see her. "I'm glad you came." The comment caught Nora's attention. "Was there a chance I wouldn't?" Marin hesitated. People often walk away when they realize how complicated this family can be. Before Nora could ask more, Marin's expression shifted. Someone was approaching. Conrad Blackwood. The atmosphere immediately changed. It always did when he entered a room. He nodded politely. But there was nothing warm in the gesture. Only evaluation. Only calculation. "You returned." Nora met his gaze. It was an invitation. Not many people decline invitations from this family. The comment sounded harmless. It wasn't. Everything Conrad said seemed to contain a second meaning. Nora was beginning to notice that. Fortunately, she didn't have to continue the conversation. A member of the staff appeared and informed her that Adrian was waiting. She left before Conrad could say anything else. When she entered Adrian's office, she immediately noticed something different. He looked tired. Not physically. Emotionally. Several files sat open on his desk. A legal team appeared on a video call displayed on one of the monitors. Financial reports covered another screen. The room felt less like a home office and more like a battlefield. Adrian ended the meeting when she entered. The attorneys disappeared from the screen. The silence that followed felt heavy. "You look like you've been fighting a war," Nora said. A faint smile appeared. "Some days that's not far from the truth." She sat across from him. Neither spoke immediately. For the first time, the silence felt familiar rather than awkward. Eventually, Adrian leaned back slightly. "You found something?" Nora blinked. "What makes you think that you're carrying questions?" The answer almost made her laugh. He wasn't wrong. She reached into her bag and placed a printed copy of the hospital photograph on his desk. The moment Adrian saw it, something changed. Not shock. Recognition. Immediate recognition. His eyes settled on Elise's face. Then he slowly looked up. "You know her." It wasn't a question. Adrian remained silent for several seconds. Then he nodded. "Yes." Nora's heartbeat quickened. Who was she? His expression became thoughtful. Careful, as if he were choosing every word. Someone who tried to help me. Nora stared at him. What does that mean? Adrian looked towards the window. The accident happened almost 2 years ago. His voice became quieter. Afterward, there were doctors, specialists, therapists, lawyers, consultants. Hundreds of people came through my life. He paused. Most of them worked for my family. And Elise. She didn't. The answer hung between them. Adrian continued. She was hired privately for a short period. Nora struggled to process the information. Why didn't anyone tell me? I don't know. You never tried to find her. At that, Adrian looked genuinely surprised. Find her. She disappeared. His expression hardened slightly. What do you mean, disappeared? For the next several minutes, Nora told him the truth. Not the shortened version, not the polite version. The real one. She told him about Elise raising her, about losing her parents, about being taken in by the Vale family, about the day Elise vanished without explanation, and about spending years wondering why she wasn't enough for the one person who had ever truly felt like family. When she finished, the room felt quieter than before. Adrian's jaw tightened. Not because of anything Elise had done, because of what Nora had endured. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they felt sincere. Nora looked down. Most people tell me to get over it. They're wrong. The answer came instantly. No hesitation. No doubt. Adrian folded his hands. People don't just stop needing answers because time passes. For a moment, Nora couldn't speak, because he understood something most people never had. Pain didn't disappear simply because years went by. Sometimes it waited. Patiently. Growing heavier. Adrian broke the silence. There's something I need to tell you. The shift in his tone immediately caught her attention. This wasn't about Elise anymore. This was about the marriage. The reason she had come. Adrian's expression became serious. The proposal wasn't my father's idea. Nora frowned. I assumed it was. It wasn't. Then whose was it? Mine? The answer landed like a stone. For several seconds, she simply stared at him. You chose me? Yes. Why? Adrian took a slow breath. The question clearly wasn't easy. Finally, he answered. Because I needed someone I could trust. Nora almost laughed. You don't know me. I know enough. How? For the first time, Adrian seemed uncomfortable. Not weak, not afraid. Just reluctant. There are people trying to control what happens to me. Nora's attention sharpened immediately. What kind of people? My father. The answer surprised her, even though it shouldn't have. Adrian continued. After the accident, a temporary guardianship structure was created. What does that mean? It means other people gained legal authority over parts of my life. Nora frowned. Because of the paralysis officially. The way he said the word made her pause. Officially, not actually. Officially. A distinction existed there. An important one. Adrian wheeled himself closer to the desk. My father controls voting power connected to the company, the aerospace company. He nodded. Blackwood. Aerospace. Nora had heard the name countless times. One of the most successful companies in the country, worth billions, employing thousands, and apparently at the center of a family war. Adrian's voice lowered. The original marriage arrangement was designed to strengthen that control. Understanding slowly began to form. Celeste. Yes, Nora sat back. The pieces were starting to connect. If she married you, your father would gain allies. Exactly. And when she refused, I needed another solution. The realization unsettled her, not because Adrian was manipulating her, because for the first time she could see how trapped he actually was. A billionaire, a CEO, one of the most powerful men in America, yet somehow still fighting for control over his own life. Money couldn't solve everything. Power couldn't solve everything. Some cages were simply built differently. Adrian held her gaze. I chose you because you don't belong to their world. Nora remained silent. You aren't connected to my father. You barely know me. I know you care more about people than status. The statement hit harder than she expected, because no one had ever chosen her for something like that. People chose Celeste for beauty, Richard for influence, Vanessa for ambition. Nobody chose Nora, not usually. Adrian continued quietly. I needed someone who wouldn't treat me like an asset. The room fell silent. For the first time, Nora saw the loneliness beneath everything else, beneath the power, the wealth, the reputation. A man surrounded by people who wanted something, a man who no longer knew who he could trust. And suddenly the proposal looked very different. Not romantic, not transactional. Desperate, human, real. Then Adrian reached into a drawer and removed a folder. He hesitated before sliding it across the desk. What is it? Nora asked. His expression darkened. Part of the reason I needed a wife. Nora opened the folder. Inside was a legal petition, guardianship review. She scanned the first page, then the second. And suddenly her blood ran cold. Conrad Blackwood was attempting to have Adrian declared permanently incapable of managing his own affairs. Nora slowly looked up. Adrian's eyes never left hers, and for the first time she realized the accident might not be the biggest threat in his life. His own family might be. Nora read the guardianship petition twice before she fully understood what she was looking at. The language was formal, clinical, carefully written by expensive lawyers. But the message was simple. Conrad Blackwood wanted the courts to decide that Adrian could no longer make important decisions for himself. Not temporarily, permanently. Nora slowly closed the folder. A strange mix of anger and disbelief settled inside her. This is real. Adrian nodded. Very. Your father is trying to take control of your company, my assets, my legal authority. He spoke without emotion, almost as if he had repeated those words too many times already. Nora stared at him. You run an aerospace corporation. Officially, you sit in board meetings. Sometimes, you negotiate billion-dollar contracts, when they let me. The last sentence lingered in the room. When they let me. The wording mattered. Because it revealed something money couldn't hide. Adrian Blackwood wasn't fighting strangers. He was fighting people who shared his last name. For several seconds, neither of them spoke. Then Nora asked the question she couldn't ignore. If you're capable of doing all that, how can anyone believe you're incompetent? A humorless smile crossed Adrian's face. Because most people don't see everything. He reached toward another folder. This one was thicker. Medical reports, rehabilitation assessments, neurological evaluations. Nora immediately understood. His injury was real. The damage was real. Nothing about this situation had been invented. The difference was far more complicated. The accident left me unable to walk, Adrian said quietly. At least at first. Nora listened carefully. The first few months were bad. I couldn't move my legs. I needed help with almost everything. He paused. The doctors weren't sure how much recovery was possible. What changed time? The answer was simple. Honest. No miracle, no dramatic breakthrough, just years of painful work, physical therapy, rehabilitation, determination. Adrian looked down at his hands. Some people saw progress, and others didn't. A shadow crossed his face. Others preferred the original diagnosis. The room became very still. Nora understood exactly what he meant. People sometimes became attached to the version of reality that benefited them, even when that reality stopped being true, especially when money was involved. She thought of Conrad, of the board, of the petition. The pieces were becoming clearer, not complete, but clearer. "How much have you recovered?" she asked. Adrian's expression changed instantly. The question hit a sensitive place. Nora noticed it immediately. If she had learned anything about him, it was this. He hated feeling vulnerable. He took several seconds before answering. Enough to make some people nervous. Not enough. Not a real answer, but it was the only one he intended to give. For now. Nora decided not to push. The conversation shifted. Adrian asked about Liam. The question surprised her. Most people forgot about Liam within minutes, not because they were cruel, because they were focused on their own lives. Adrian wasn't. How old is he? 12? And you've been raising him alone as much as the law allows. He nodded thoughtfully. Then he surprised her again. My mother used to volunteer with foster programs. Nora looked up. You were close. The question softened something in him. Not much. Just enough. Very. For the first time she saw genuine grief. Years old, still alive. Some wounds never fully disappeared. They simply learned to coexist with the rest of your life. Adrian looked away towards the ocean. She believed people deserved dignity before they earned success. Nora smiled slightly. Sounds like a good woman. She was. Another silence followed. This one gentler. Neither seemed eager to break it. Eventually, Adrian spoke again. The reason I wanted to tell you all this isn't because I'm asking for sympathy. I know. It's because if you say yes, you'll be stepping into something complicated. Nora looked at him. You're giving me another chance to walk away. Yes. Most people would be trying to convince me. I'm not most people. No. He wasn't. And that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. Hours later, Nora left Blackwood House with more answers than before, but also more responsibility, because now she understood what was really happening. This wasn't simply a business marriage. It wasn't just about money, or status, or corporate politics. It was about trust, and trust was far more dangerous. The drive home felt quieter than usual. By the time she arrived at the Vale residence, she already knew something was wrong. Too many cars sat in the driveway. Too many lights were on. Voices echoed from inside. As soon as she entered, she found herself staring at a gathering she hadn't expected. Richard, Vanessa, Celeste, and 3 unfamiliar people wearing expensive suits. Everyone stopped talking when she walked in. Vanessa immediately smiled. A performance smile. One Nora had learned to recognize years ago. There she is. Nora's stomach tightened. What is this? One of the men stepped forward. Corporate, confident, carefully polished. My name is Edward Collins. He offered a hand. Nora ignored it. Edward lowered his hand without reacting. I'm here on behalf of the Vale Group. Nora frowned. The Vale Group belonged to Richard's business partners, not her. Richard stood. We've been discussing future opportunities. Future opportunities. The phrase immediately made her suspicious. Edward smiled. The Blackwood Alliance opened significant possibilities, Alliance, not marriage, alliance. Again, the wording mattered. Because it revealed how these people thought. They weren't discussing two human beings. They were discussing leverage, assets, connections. Nora felt something inside her harden. Have I agreed to anything? The room fell silent. No one answered, because the answer was obvious. No, she hadn't. Yet they were already planning around her. The realization left a bitter taste in her mouth. Later that evening, after everyone finally left, Nora confronted Vanessa in the kitchen. The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. It felt much longer. You never cared whether I was happy? Vanessa laughed. Happiness is a luxury. No. Nora shook her head. Respect shouldn't be. The older woman stared at her, clearly surprised, because Nora rarely pushed back. Years of surviving had taught her caution. But something was changing. Slowly. Maybe because she had finally spent time around someone who treated her like her choices mattered, even if that person happened to be a billionaire in a wheelchair. Vanessa's expression cooled. You're becoming difficult. No. Nora met her gaze. I'm becoming honest. That ended the conversation. But it didn't end the tension. That night, Nora sat alone in her room. The photograph of Elise remained open on her laptop. The same image, the same hospital, the same unanswered questions. Almost absent-mindedly, she began searching again. Different databases, different archives, different keywords. Hours passed. Most searches led nowhere. Then she found something. Not a photograph, not an article, a hospital document. Old, partially archived. The record was incomplete, but one line immediately caught her attention. Attending rehabilitation. Nurse Elise Moreno. Nora's heart nearly stopped. For several seconds, she simply stared. Then she read it again. And again. There was no mistake. Elise hadn't merely been near the hospital. She had worked directly with Adrian, which meant the connection wasn't accidental. It was real. A chill ran through her, because suddenly another question appeared. If Elise had been part of Adrian's recovery, then maybe she knew what truly happened after the accident. Maybe she knew things the newspapers never reported. Maybe she knew why a crash investigation had been sealed. And maybe, just maybe, the woman who disappeared from Nora's life had never disappeared by choice at all. The thought hit so hard she barely noticed her phone vibrating beside the laptop. An unknown number. She almost ignored it. Almost. Then she answered. Silence greeted her. Several seconds passed. No voice, no introduction, nothing. Just breathing. Then a woman finally spoke. Soft, nervous, almost whispering. Stop looking into the accident. Nora froze. The voice sounded familiar, terrifyingly familiar. Before she could respond, the caller added one final sentence, a sentence that sent ice through her veins. Your mother tried to protect him once. Don't make the same mistake. Then the line went dead. Nora remained frozen long after the call ended. The phone was still pressed against her ear. The screen had already gone dark. Yet she couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't breathe properly. Your mother tried to protect him once. Don't make the same mistake. The words repeated inside her head again and again. The voice had sounded familiar. Not familiar enough to identify, but familiar enough to make her skin crawl. Eventually, she forced herself to put the phone down. Her hands were shaking. The logical part of her mind immediately began searching for explanations. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe someone from the Blackwood family wanted to scare her. Maybe she was connecting things that weren't connected. But deep down, she knew better. The woman on the phone had known about Elise. She had known about Adrian. And she had known Nora was investigating. That wasn't a coincidence. Someone was watching. The realization made sleep impossible. By sunrise, Nora had made a decision. She was done standing on the edge. She needed answers. Real answers. Not rumors. Not assumptions. Not carefully edited stories. That afternoon, she drove back to Blackwood House unannounced. For the first time since meeting Adrian, she didn't wait for an invitation. The security guards recognized her immediately and allowed her through. Apparently, her status had already changed. That thought felt strange. Only a week earlier, she had been invisible. Now doors opened, not because she had become more valuable, because powerful people suddenly believed she might become useful. The difference bothered her. Inside the estate, Morin greeted her with surprise. "Nora, I need to see Adrian." Something in her voice must have revealed the urgency. Morin nodded immediately. "He's in the rehabilitation wing." The words caught Nora off guard. Rehabilitation wing. Morin looked as though she regretted saying it. But it was too late. "The therapy rooms are downstairs." Nora stared at her. Therapy Morin hesitated, then quietly said, "Just go see him." The answer only deepened her curiosity. A few minutes later, Nora found herself walking through a section of the estate she had never seen before. The atmosphere felt different here. Less luxurious, more functional. Medical equipment lined portions of the corridor. Exercise machines. Recovery equipment. Treatment rooms. It looked less like a billionaire's mansion and more like a private rehabilitation center. She followed the sound of movement until she reached a partially open door. Then she stopped. Inside the room, Adrian wasn't sitting behind a desk. He wasn't attending meetings. He wasn't reviewing contracts. He wasn't in his wheelchair. For a moment, Nora thought she was imagining things. Adrian stood between a pair of support bars. Not easily. Not comfortably. Every muscle in his body looked strained. Sweat covered his forehead. His hands gripped the rails tightly. A physical therapist stood nearby, watching, ready to help if needed. Adrian took a step, then another. Each movement seemed to cost him something. Pain, effort, determination. The distance was only a few feet, yet it looked harder than running a marathon. Nora couldn't look away, because suddenly everything made sense. Not all of it, but enough. The injury was real. The recovery was real. The struggle was real. The world believed Adrian was permanently helpless. The reality was far more complicated. A floorboard creaked beneath Nora's foot. Adrian looked up. Their eyes met. The room fell silent. The therapist immediately stepped back, clearly sensing this conversation wasn't meant for him. For several seconds, neither spoke. Then Adrian slowly lowered himself back into the wheelchair. Not embarrassed, not ashamed, just tired. Very tired. Finally, he broke the silence. "You weren't supposed to see that." Nora stepped into the room. "How long?" His expression remained unreadable. "Long." "Can you walk?" He looked away. A small gesture, but it told her everything. The question hurt, not because of what it implied, because of what it touched. After a moment, he answered. "Sometimes." The honesty felt heavier than any lie. Nora pulled a chair closer. Neither of them mentioned marriage. Neither mentioned business. For the first time, they spoke simply as two people carrying different kinds of pain. "You should have told me." Adrian laughed quietly. Not because anything was funny, because the situation wasn't. "Why? Because I thought she stopped." Unsure how to finish the sentence. Adrian helped her. "You thought I was either completely paralyzed or completely lying." Nora didn't deny it. Because it was true. Adrian leaned back. The public likes simple stories. You said that before. Because it's true. His gaze drifted towards the therapy bars. The truth is less dramatic. Nora remained silent. Adrian continued, "Some days I can stand, some days you can't. Exactly." He rubbed one hand across his face. The fatigue showed now. More than ever. Recovery isn't a straight line. Those words stayed with Nora. Because they applied to more than physical injury. People healed in complicated ways. From grief, from betrayal, from abandonment, from loss. Nobody recovered in a perfect upward line. Life didn't work like that. For several moments, the room remained quiet. Then Nora decided to tell him about the phone call. Every word, the warning, the mention of Elise, the final sentence. As she spoke, Adrian's expression slowly changed. Not fear, concern, recognition. When she finished, he remained silent longer than expected. Finally, he asked one question. Did the voice sound familiar? Maybe. Maybe I can't explain it. He nodded, as if that answer made sense. And somehow she suspected it did. Adrian looked toward the window. The people around my accident weren't random. Nora's attention sharpened immediately. What do you mean there were doctors? He counted quietly. Therapists, attorneys, administrators. Another pause. Nurses. Elise. The unspoken name hung between them. Neither needed to say it. Adrian looked troubled now. Deeply troubled. The day Elise disappeared, she tried to speak with me. Nora's heart skipped. What his jaw tightened. I didn't know that was what she was doing at the time. The room seemed to shrink. Every instinct told Nora she was finally approaching something important. What happened? Adrian stared at the floor. His voice became quieter. She said there were things in my medical file that didn't make sense. Nora felt a chill spread through her body. What kind of things I never found out? Why not? A bitter smile appeared. Because she disappeared the next day. Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that changed a room. Nora looked at him. Really looked at him. Not the billionaire, not the CEO, not the Blackwood heir. Just a man who had spent 2 years trapped inside questions nobody wanted answered. Suddenly she understood why he seemed so tired. It wasn't only the recovery. It wasn't only the board. It wasn't only his father. It was uncertainty. Living inside uncertainty could exhaust a person more than any physical injury. Then another thought struck her. Fast. Sharp. Terrifying. She reached into her bag and pulled out the archived hospital record she had printed earlier. The one naming Elise as Adrian's rehabilitation nurse. She handed it to him. Adrian read it carefully. Then again. And for the first time since she'd met him, genuine shock crossed his face. Not controlled surprise, not calculated concern. Shock, what Nora asked. Adrian slowly looked up. His expression had gone pale. Elise wasn't assigned to my rehabilitation team. Nora frowned. Waddy held up the document. This shouldn't exist. Every nerve in Nora's body tightened. What are you talking about? Adrian's voice dropped almost to a whisper. The nurse assigned to me during that period wasn't Elise. A pause. A terrible pause. Then he spoke the words neither of them were prepared to hear. Someone changed the records, and suddenly the mystery wasn't just about a missing woman anymore. It was about a medical file that had been altered, a sealed accident report, a guardianship battle, and a billionaire whose own history might have been rewritten by someone inside his family. Nora barely noticed how long she sat in the rehabilitation room after Adrian spoke. Someone changed the records. The sentence echoed through her mind. Because if the medical records had been altered, then everything connected to them became questionable. The accident, the guardianship, the recovery reports, even Elise's disappearance. For the first time, Nora could see a pattern. Not clearly, not completely, but enough to recognize that none of these events existed in isolation. Someone had been controlling the story for years, and powerful people only controlled stories when the truth threatened them. Adrian remained silent for a long time. His expression had become distant, like a man revisiting memories he had spent years trying to organize. Finally, he looked at Nora. "We need proof." She nodded. "Not theories." "Exactly. Who would know?" The answer came immediately. "Maren." Nora wasn't surprised. Neither of them spoke for several seconds. Both had noticed the same thing from the beginning. Maren always seemed afraid. Not afraid of Adrian, not afraid of the company, afraid of something specific, or someone specific. An hour later, they found her alone in the estate's library. She was reading, but clearly not concentrating. The moment she saw Adrian and Nora enter together, her face changed. Not dramatically. Just enough. Enough to confirm their instincts, Maren Adrian said quietly. His aunt closed the book. What happened? Nora placed the altered hospital record on the table. Maren looked down. The color drained from her face. That reaction told them more than words ever could. For several seconds, nobody moved. Then Maren slowly sat down, as if her legs had suddenly become weaker. "You know what this is," Adrian said. It wasn't a question. Maren closed her eyes. The silence stretched. Then finally she whispered something Nora barely heard. "I hoped this would never come back." The room became still. Adrian lowered himself into a chair across from her. "Then tell us the truth." Maren looked older than before. Not physically, emotionally, like someone carrying a burden for too long. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded exhausted. "Your accident was real." Adrian nodded. "I know. The injuries were real, I know. But what happened afterward?" She stopped. Her hands trembled slightly. Nora noticed. So did Adrian. "What happened afterward?" he asked. Maren stared at the document. Then at Adrian, then at the floor, almost as if she couldn't bear looking directly at the consequences of her silence. Finally she answered. "Your father became obsessed with control." The words landed heavily. Nobody interrupted. Maren continued. "The doctors originally believed your recovery was uncertain." Adrian's jaw tightened. "But not hopeless." "No." She shook her head. "Never hopeless." Nora felt her pulse quicken. Every sentence seemed to pull another piece into place. Maren leaned back slowly. Some specialists reported positive neurological responses much earlier than expected. Adrian stared at her. "You saw those reports?" "Yes." And Maren swallowed. "Your father buried them." The room went silent. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the sound of the ocean outside seemed distant. Adrian looked completely still, not shocked, not angry. Something worse. A man watching old suspicions become facts. Nora felt sick. Because she could suddenly understand the logic. Twisted, cruel, but logical. A disabled heir was easier to control. A dependent son was easier to manage. A compromised CEO was easier to replace. Money changed people. Power changed them even more. Maren's eyes filled with regret. He didn't cause the accident. The clarification came quickly, almost desperately. He didn't arrange it. Nora believed her. The story never needed Conrad to be a cartoon villain. Reality rarely worked that way. Sometimes people simply exploited tragedy when it appeared. And that was terrible enough. Marin continued. When the doctors disagreed about your long-term prognosis, Conrad supported the reports that favored guardianship. Adrian laughed softly. A bitter sound. So he chose the version of me that benefited him. Marin lowered her head. Yes. The honesty hurt more than denial would have. For several moments, nobody spoke. Then Nora asked the question she could no longer ignore. What about Elise? Everything changed. The moment the name left her mouth, Marin froze, completely froze. Adrian noticed it instantly, so she was involved. Marin looked trapped, years of silence collapsing around her. Eventually she nodded. Slowly, painfully. She discovered inconsistencies. Nora's heartbeat accelerated. What kind of inconsistencies the rehabilitation reports? Marin's voice shook. Medication records. Another pause. Recovery assessments. Adrian leaned forward. Tell me everything. Marin took a deep breath. Then the truth began to emerge. Not dramatically, not all at once. Piece by piece, like someone finally opening a locked room. Elise had worked briefly with a private recovery team, reviewing patient progress. She wasn't Adrian's assigned nurse. That part of the record had indeed been altered later. But she had reviewed documentation connected to his rehabilitation, and she noticed something disturbing. Certain reports disappeared. Others changed. Progress notes failed to match examination results. Dates were modified. Recommendations vanished. Nothing obvious enough to trigger criminal investigations. Just enough to slowly shape a narrative. A narrative that suggested Adrian remained more dependent than he actually was. Nora felt anger building inside her. Not explosive anger. Something colder. The kind that appeared when people abused trust, because medical records weren't business strategies. They were people's lives. Marin wiped at her eyes. Elise confronted people, who Adrian asked. She hesitated, then answered. Your father's legal team. The room fell silent again. Nora could almost picture it. Elise standing alone. Working class, no wealth, no power, no connections, yet still willing to challenge people far more powerful than herself. Because some people simply couldn't ignore injustice, no matter the cost. What happened to her? Nora asked. Marin looked directly at her, for the first time, and the sorrow in her eyes felt real. She was threatened. Nora's chest tightened. Threatened how not physically. Marin shook her head. Legally, that answer made terrible sense. Powerful people rarely needed violence. They had lawyers, influence, pressure, fear. Marin continued. They learned she was helping raise 2 children. Nora's stomach dropped. Herself. And Liam, or at least the younger children Elise had been protecting. Marin's voice broke. They implied they could make her life impossible. No one spoke, because everyone understood. People with limited resources couldn't afford endless legal battles, couldn't afford losing employment, couldn't afford becoming targets. Elise had been cornered, not by criminals, by systems, which was somehow even more believable. Then Nora asked the question she had carried for 10 years, the question that still hurt. Did she abandon me? Marin's eyes immediately filled with tears. No. The answer came instantly, without hesitation, without doubt. No, Nora. For a second the room disappeared. Everything disappeared. All she could hear was that single word. No. Marin reached into her purse. Her hands trembled. Then she removed an old envelope. yellowed with age, worn at the edges. She placed it carefully on the table. Nora stared at it. "What is that?" Maren swallowed hard. "A letter." The world seemed to stop. Nora couldn't breathe. A letter from who you already know. Her hands shook as she picked it up. The handwriting on the envelope was familiar, painfully familiar. She hadn't seen it in years, but she recognized it instantly. Elise Moreno. Nora's vision blurred. The letter had never been mailed, never delivered, never seen. For 10 years. Maren looked devastated. "I found it after she disappeared." Adrian stared at her. "You kept it." The accusation was obvious, deserved. Maren nodded weakly. "I was afraid." The admission sounded pathetic, human, and tragic. Fear had ruined more lives than hatred ever would. Nora carefully opened the envelope. Inside was a folded sheet of paper. Only a few pages. Not long. Her eyes moved to the first line, and immediately tears filled them, because the letter didn't begin with explanations, or excuses, or apologies. It began with 4 simple words. "My dear Nora." And for the first time in 10 years, Nora knew with absolute certainty that Elise had never stopped loving her. But before she could continue reading, a security guard rushed into the library, breathless, alarmed. Mr. Blackwood. Everyone looked up. The guard's face had gone pale. "There's someone at the front gate." Adrian frowned. "Who?" The guard swallowed, then spoke the one name nobody expected to hear. Elise Moreno. And suddenly the woman they had spent years searching for was standing outside the estate. The final hearing lasted less than 3 hours. Years of manipulation collapsed in less than one morning. The evidence Maren provided opened the door. Elise's testimony pushed it wider. The altered medical records, the buried recovery reports, the legal pressure used against caregivers, and the guardianship decisions built on incomplete information painted a picture nobody in the room could ignore. Conrad Blackwood had not caused the accident. That part was true, but he had exploited it. He had protected a version of reality that gave him control. And in the end, that distinction mattered very little. When the ruling came down, Adrian sat perfectly still. The temporary guardianship structure was terminated. Full executive authority was restored. Control of Blackwood Aerospace returned to him. Several civil investigations would continue. Conrad would face those consequences himself. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Then Adrian looked across the room toward his father. The older man looked smaller than he ever had before. Not because he had lost money, not because he had lost influence, because everyone could finally see what fear had turned him into. Conrad had spent years trying to keep control, and in the process he had lost the very thing he claimed to protect: his family. Adrian could have humiliated him, could have delivered the speech everyone expected, could have chosen revenge. Instead, he simply stood. Slowly, carefully, without assistance. The room fell silent. Not because people were shocked anymore, because they finally understood what those few steps represented. Not a miracle, not a performance. 2 years of pain, 2 years of work, 2 years of refusing to quit. Then Adrian left the courtroom without saying another word. Outside, reporters crowded the steps. Questions flew from every direction. He ignored almost all of them, until one reporter shouted a single question. "Mr. Blackwood, how does it feel to win?" Adrian stopped, thought for a moment, then answered, "I didn't come here to win. The cameras followed him. I came here to get my life back." That became the headline the next morning. But for Nora, the most important moment happened later. Far away from cameras, Far away from lawyers, far away from billion-dollar companies. She sat on the porch of a small rental house overlooking the water. Elise sat beside her. For the first time in 10 years, neither knew where to begin. Some wounds were too large for simple conversations. Eventually, Elise broke the silence. "I read your letter every birthday." Nora looked at her. "What letter?" "The one I never sent." Tears filled Elise's eyes. "I wrote dozens." Her voice trembled. "Some I mailed. Most I didn't." Nora stared at the ocean. "You should have told me." "I know. You should have trusted me. I know. The honesty hurt. But it also healed, because excuses would have made everything worse." Elise wasn't pretending she had made perfect choices. She hadn't. Life rarely offered perfect choices, only impossible ones. "I thought leaving would protect you." Nora looked down. "You were wrong. I was." The answer came immediately. No defense, no argument, just truth. For several moments, neither spoke. Then Elise reached into her bag. She pulled out a small stack of photographs. Old photographs. Nora as a child, covered in paint, missing front teeth, laughing in a park, asleep on a couch, proof of something she had questioned for years, proof she had been loved. Elise wiped away tears. "I never stopped looking for you." Nora's own tears finally came. Not dramatic, not explosive, just quiet. The kind that arrived when pain finally had somewhere safe to go. For years she had believed she wasn't enough. Not beautiful enough. Not important enough. Not wanted enough. Now she understood something different. Elise hadn't left because Nora lacked value. She left because powerful people had convinced her there was no safe way to stay. It didn't erase the damage, but it changed the meaning. And sometimes meaning changed everything. A few weeks later, Nora returned to the Vale residence one last time. Not for revenge, not for closure, for Liam. The conversation was brief. Vanessa tried to justify herself. Richard tried to minimize the past. Celeste avoided responsibility entirely. Nora listened. Then she simply told them the truth. They no longer controlled her life. They never would again. She left with Liam that afternoon. No arguments, no dramatic confrontation, just freedom. Sometimes the strongest ending wasn't defeating someone. Sometimes it was no longer needing their permission. The months that followed brought changes neither Nora nor Adrian could have imagined. Elise helped establish a legal advocacy fund for caregivers, nurses, and vulnerable patients who faced institutional pressure. Adrian funded it personally. Nora helped run it. The program started small, then grew. Stories began arriving from people who had been ignored, dismissed, or silenced. People who simply needed someone to believe them. For the first time, something good emerged from everything they had endured. And through all of it, Adrian and Nora rebuilt their relationship, slowly, honestly, without pretending it had started as a love story, because it hadn't. It started with survival, then trust, then respect. The rest came later. One evening nearly a year after the hearing, Nora walked through the rehabilitation wing of Blackwood House. The room looked familiar. The support bars, the equipment, the quiet determination that lived inside those walls. She stopped in the doorway. Adrian was there, practicing, moving carefully, step by step, not perfect, not fully recovered. Maybe he never would be. But something had changed. The wheelchair no longer represented shame. The injury no longer defined him. The fear no longer owned him. He noticed Nora watching. A smile appeared. Small. Real. the kind that didn't need words. For a moment, neither moved. Then Adrian took another step forward, and another. Not because anyone was watching, not because he had something to prove, simply because he could. Nora smiled through tears. After everything that felt like the true ending, not the court victory, not the company, not the money, a man reclaiming his future, a woman reclaiming her name, and two people learning that dignity was worth more than power ever could be. If this story touched you, share the moment that stayed with you most, and don't forget to follow along for more stories about ordinary people who discovered their worth long before the world did.